try to base all my decisions on economics and profitability. I don't focus a lot on the yield side of our equation unless it starts going down. I don't think in a soil health and cover crop system you're going to see your yields jump. Keith just showed that in a graph with some good data there. I don't think you're going to see your yields jump, but I think you can reduce your cost of growing what you're growing while maintaining your yield. And that's what we've been able to do. But it doesn't happen overnight. And Keith showed a lot of that as well. We started this, bear in mind when I'm talking about this and we're going through these presentations, we are roughly 30 plus years removed from conventional tillage. We came out of conventional tillage in the late 90s and went into a strip till and single species cover crop system. Most of that was rye or triticale that was flown on into a crop. When it got to be about this tall, we got scared of it and we killed it. And then we strip tilled into that residue. But that was a jumping off point for me to start our journey into multi-species and no-till, which started in the winter of 2013. Yeah. So we're, a good 12 years in now. This is our first multi-species cover crop that we planted, and looking at that you can see there's not a lot there. It was basically triticale with a few radishes mixed in, and we did that because of an NRCS program. That was what kicked us off the cliff and made us start down this road, was chasing an NRCS payment, which is completely okay. I wish more folks would do it and stick with it once the program's ended. But that's where we started. And then also that same year, we put in 40 acres of a really crazy multi-species blend. And I can't remember exactly what was in it. It was veg, clover, a couple grains. But we put 40 acres of it in compared to the triticale and radish that we had that we did the way we'd always done it. This stuff came out of the ground. It grew incredibly good. Lisa, will you let me know when I've got 10, 15 minutes left, please?
Yes, sir.
It grew incredibly well. The only problem was when this time of year rolled around and we were looking at it in March, my dad said, "How are you going to plant into that stuff?" So I don't know, I haven't thought about that. And I called the people that I bought seed from. Luckily, they were extremely nice and spent a lot of time with me. And the guy said, "What are you planting with?" I told him. I said, "It's a Deere 1720 planter." He said, "Strip till?" I said, "Yes." He said, "All right, just go plant it." And I did exactly what I did just then, which was what? He said, "Just go plant it, you'll be fine." My dad did not respond in a way that I can share in mixed company. But I told him, I said, "Give me a day. If we can't make it work, we'll spray everything with Gramoxone. In 3 days, it'll be crispy dead, and we'll never talk about it again." It worked. The tests that we did that year did not work because immediately out of the gate, I thought, all right, we can start pulling back on our fertility. This was going into corn land. That year I did strips in this exact same field and started pulling back on our fertility. We did a 50% of our normal rate, we did a 70% of our normal rate, we did 100, and we did 125, just to keep everything fair. The 100 and the 125, everything was as it should be. It was normal. We didn't gain anything through the extra fertility. The 75% rate that we did, the savings in the fertilizer did not pay for the yield loss, but it was close enough that it made me interested to see, can we continue to do this? The 50% rate was a disaster. So we've continued with that over time as we've moved through our stuff, and kind of the lens and focus of where we are now. We're now 100% no-till. We did that over time. I had a 5-acre field that I would go in every year when we went and plant that field, and I'd take the rippers off of our strip till rig. And I'd go plant that 5-acre field, and then I'd put them back on and go plant everything else. And we watched it over time until we proved that we did not need to pull that ripper. I'm running an 8-row strip till rig, or I was. Pulling that ripper, we were burning about 10 to 11 gallons of fuel an hour. Now we're burning about 1.5 gallons an hour, pulling the same 8-row set of planters. That's huge. So we kept moving and we kept moving into bigger and bigger biomass and chasing planting green. I wanted to do it all. I wanted to get all the benefits that I could as quick as I could, and eventually it came back and it ate my lunch. We chased some really huge cover crops. A lot of times we're looking at 8,000 to 10,000 pounds plus of above ground biomass. And in corn and beans, that works really well. In cotton, sometimes that's a challenge, because for the first month that cotton comes out of the ground, all it wants to do is crawl back in the ground and die. But luckily, out of the gate, we had enough successes that it made me keep trying to figure out how we're gonna do this. So over time, when we started, we were establishing our cover crop with a grain drill. We were planting in the low 50 pounds of seed per acre, because that's what I was told to do. So over time, we started pulling back our seeding rate on the grain drill. Eventually, we started establishing our cover crop with a planter and establishing it on 15-inch rows, which has now gone to 18-inch rows because that fits our 36-inch corn and cotton spacing. So we're planting beans on 18s, we're planting corn and cotton on 36s, we're planting our cover on 18-inch rows. That way we're getting the best of both worlds, because we're able to use this cover crop for all the ways that we've done for all the good stuff, but we're not having to deal with that interference when we're establishing our cash crop, because we've got a nice clean alley in there that you'll see some of that when we go to the farm. This is just some of the results. In cotton, you can see we've got a huge mass of cover crop in there that we were planting into. When it works like that, it works really well. When it doesn't work, it fails miserably. But this is some of the stuff that we've established on 18-inch rows. This is 2 years ago, I believe, but you can see the different species we've got in there. Unfortunately, when I took this picture, I was still trying to line my rows up. I do a better job of that now. And there it is behind beans a couple years ago. But one of the things that this made me think about when we were doing this is, if we're going to maximize the benefits of these cover crops, what is it that we can control when we're dealing with a cover crop? Because for the most part, once you put a cover crop seed in the ground, the only decision you've got left is, when am I going to kill it and how am I going to kill it? So a lot of what I think needs to be done is thinking about what we're going to do, and thinking about our cover crop before we plant it, and thinking about what we want out of that cover crop before we plant it. Because, like I said, once you order seed, or you take your seed out of the bin and you put it in the ground or on the ground, it's done. The only thing you've got left is to kill it. So what can we control? We can control what we plant. We can control the number of species, we can control the number of seed families that we're dealing with, we can control how and where we plant it. Are we going to fly it on? Are we going to put it on with planter? Are we going to put it on with grain drill? Are we going to put it on with spreader? Are we going to try to incorporate it some way once we put it on with a spreader? All of those are questions you need to think about ahead of time. How much are we going to plant? To me, this is a huge issue. I said it was an NRCS payment that got us started. It was also an NRCS seeding rate that almost drove me mad. In my opinion, and they can draw and quarter me if they want to, in my opinion, in this part of the world, there is no need to go into 60 to 90 pounds of seed per acre in a cover crop. It's just too much. Now, if you're putting it out with a spreader in December, you might need that much. So hopefully something makes it through. But if you're establishing a cover crop in a timely manner, I don't think you need that much. And all it's gonna do is cause you headaches on the backside when you go to plant it. What we've seen so far as we've reduced the number of seed per acre, or the pounds of seed per acre, the number of seed per acre, and gone into these rows, is we've gone from in the low 50 pounds per acre to 27-ish, depending on how it goes through the planter. So now our total cover crop seed per acre is about 27 pounds. We have the same amount of above ground biomass that we did when we were planting in the low 50 pound range. We have actually, I can't weigh it because roots don't work that way, but from what my eye tells me, we have more roots in the ground than we did when we were planting 55 pounds to the acre. So I think if we give these cover crops and give the plants room to express themselves, they can do a lot more than if we crowd them together. And it saves us a lot of money. Just to somewhat build on that, the timing of when and how you terminate can be extremely important in the results of a cover crop. First week of March, this is what we had. I've got about a 2-inch tall rye or triticale seedling there. I've got 11 inches of roots under it. I've got one here that's about 4 inches tall, and we're down to 20 inches of roots. And this is in the first week of March. Imagine what that's gonna do underground if we let that stuff live until mid-April if we're talking about corn and beans, or going into the last of April, the 1st of May if we're talking about cotton. We're just gonna reap so many more benefits out of that cover crop if we give it time to do its job. And I'm gonna skip through these, and I'll be glad to talk to y'all about that later. But what I really want to get to, when Keith talked, he talked about reducing inputs. This is probably the thing that I've got going on that has me the most excited right now. We started this project, it's been 5 growing seasons and 6 soil samples ago. We took a 33-acre field, we took 10 acres out of the middle of it, and basically created a check zone. And what you're looking at here, these are fertilized just like we've always done it, both sides. This arc through the middle is irrigation, so we've got irrigation, we've got dry land, and then we've got a spot in the middle here that is our 10-acre check. And for the last 5 growing seasons, we have not spread phosphorus, potassium, or lime in that check strip. And the next few slides tell that whole story, but to give it to you really quickly, our yields are the same or better where we've not spread any fertilizer, where we've not spread phosphorus, potassium, or lime. If they were less, the savings on the fertilizer paid for it. With the exception of this year where our dryland plot failed miserably. And I think that was a 20 bushel difference that's mainly attributed to the fact that we were so dry that our biology was not able to do its job when that corn needed it. But basically what we're seeing, not only in yield, but these represent all of our soil test values. You can see that they move. The blue sections are the check strip with no spreader truck fertility. The brown and tan sections are business as usual. Our soil fertility levels move, but they seem to be moving in concert with each other. They move up, they move down. We've not fallen off a cliff yet. We've got a canary in the coal mine that's been there for 5 years, and so far it says we're okay. We don't need to spread phosphorus, potassium, or lime. And on my operation, which is 900 acres, normally that represents somewhere between 60 to 70 bucks an acre spread across the entire operation. per year. There's the tail end of our soil test indices, and these are pounds per acre. I was asked once if these were NCDA indexes. But all of this is measured in pounds per acre. And then what everybody really wants to see, there's our yields over those 5 years. And the only spot where the zero fertility trials have cost me money was last year on half of that, on 5 acres. So that's pretty much what I wanted to get through. I will be glad to answer any questions. Grab me, pull me aside. The farm's always open. Grab my email, grab my phone number, and I will be glad to do whatever I can to try to help any of y'all. And if there's a question you've got later today, grab me, pull me to the side. Yes, sir.
So based on that data on your 10 acres, have you reduced on the rest of the farm? And if so, how much? And if not, what's your plan?
I'm wrestling with myself really hard about that. I have not pulled back our spreader truck program yet. Everywhere but that 10 acres is still business as usual. That's a discussion that I'm having with myself, with the people who help me gather all of that data. We have pulled back on nitrogen use over time. Our cotton nitrogen budget is now about 75% of what it was originally, and I think there's still room to improve there depending on the season. Our corn nitrogen use is down to about 0.7 of a pound per bushel. And I think we can pull it farther back than that, where I'm just not 100% comfortable yet. But I mean, when we started this, we were well over a bushel, or well over a pound per bushel.
Yeah. What are your pHs running?
We used to run 6 to 6. We run a 6 and then a 6.2 if we were going into cotton. Over the last couple of years, we've pushed everything to a 6.5. With the diagram that you showed, just looking at a 6.5, it looks like we're getting the best of everything before we start to reduce availability. And in our part of the world, you know, a 6.2 was normal for cotton, so moving it to a 6.5 wasn't that bad.
And did you see your pH change where you stopped applying lime?
No. I mean, it moves, but it moves in concert with everything else. I mean, you can see there is a slide in there where you can definitely see if we made an application to the business as usual part of it, where those will go up. But then they tick back down and everything starts to move in concert until that index triggers another application. Yes, sir.
Are you applying biology as well, or just going with everything?
Yes. Not across the board, but I will use a biological product here and there. But that has been very recent, and a lot of the early data, the first 3 years of data that's in those slides had no biologicals at all
And I guess, to piggyback on that, you think that when you go into your cover crop, have you, like, your residue, like, you know, we've gone like down the road trying to get residue black broken down. Do you think going into cover crops is cycle the residue a lot better?
Yes. When we started, the original cover crop blend that we started with when we were planting 54, 55 pounds to the acre, after the first 3-4 years, we had to go back in and up the people that I was dealing with then told me to go in and up my grasses because I had nothing left at the end of the year. And Carl can probably speak to that as well. When I started dealing with Carl, you know, he said, you're using a ton of grasses. And we changed some of that over time. And basically what I've got now, it still goes away. But with growing a much bigger, robust plant in reducing that seeding rate, I think we're getting a little bit higher carbon to nitrogen ratio that's letting some of that hang around a little bit longer. And so I think that may have something to do with it. 2 minutes.
If I could, we've got some customers who've gotten away from a lot of synthetic fertilizers, and they're actually, they had a residue problem before they started cover crops. In other words, you'd see the old soybean residue on top of the corn residue, the wheat residue hadn't broken down through a rotation. And when they started cover crops and started backing off some of their synthetics, they actually are at a residue deficit now because your biology will help break all that down so much faster. But without the biology, it tends to build and build. But with the biology, they actually are actually coming up toward the end of the year. A lot of it's about gone, but that's a good thing because it's breaking it down, turning to organic matter. So it's kind of a two-part thing. It's not just cover crops and everything's gonna start breaking down quicker. You've got to make some other changes, I think, to kind of accelerate that.
And normally, if we come out of if the cotton market was a little bit better, I'd be coming out of corn and I'd be going into a cotton crop. And normally, if we come out of corn and go into cotton or beans, by the time we're getting ready to go in and harvest, we've got some corn residue left. But if you grab it, it's nothing but just that outer husk. And, you know, the root ball is really one of the only things that still has any resistance to it if you try to just crush it.
I was wondering, we've done residue digestion before, we like biology, I was just wondering if we were running cover crops as well, is that, you know, what is that, 15, 16 bucks an acre we're spending there on the residue digester, is that necessary?
I've done checks with multiple different residue digesters. I'm not really seeing, they may turn corn stalk a different color. You know, it may be a little blacker than the one sitting beside it, but, you know, but I've not seen where there was a measurable difference when we went in and planted.
Are you adjusting your seed rate, depending on what your next cash crop's gonna be based off of your carbon nitrogen ratio, or you pretty much across?
No, sir, with where we've gone right now with putting it in on rows and pulling that seeding rate so far back for the covers, we're pretty much just across the board with the same blend.
We'll keep it on each calculator.
Well, no, there's still room for improvement in there. But this is, you know, we're 3 years in on putting it in on rows and pulling that seeding rate back. So, you know, I'm getting comfortable enough with that. This year's major changes were changes to our planters. So hopefully once we get that done, and we can talk about that more at the farm, but once we get that done, then I can start looking at what's next as far as our cover cropping system and what we're gonna change there.
Zeb, I've noticed that, I sell seed corn and I go look at plots, and a lot of times I go to a cornfield, it's so dark green, you think, well, there's 200 bushels of corn, and you go there, they're a little tiny ear, because you got too much synthetic fertilizer, nitrogen, and it compromises your root, the stalk, and it creates an environment for disease and also for insects. The same way with cotton, I mean, if you put too much synthetic nitrogen on cotton, all you're gonna do is be spraying picks 3 or 4 times a year. So, I've actually, I sell microbial products, and actually I've seen some cornfields that weren't as dark green, but they had as good a year on it, and the plant was a lot healthier, and the same way with cotton, that I didn't see any yield drop by dropping back on my nitrogen.
Yes, sir.
And I think Dr. Heiniger, he's saying that really about all you need is 7/10 nitrogen, whereas people used to be saying 1.2 pounds of nitrogen. So,
And
we got a lot of room, we got a lot to learn.
one of the easiest ways to pull back on nitrogen that I found that doesn't involve cover crops at all is timing and placement. If you're spreading a dry nitrogen product across every acre of your farm and that's your nitrogen budget for the year and you're doing it before planting, you're gonna lose a lot of that before your corn planting.
Sure.
So I mean, that's another thing to think about there that we've done with corn and cotton as well, is trying to put that nitrogen and put whatever it is that we're feeding that plant put it out as close to the time that it's gonna call for it as needed. And it takes a little bit of time, but it's an easy way to save a bunch of money.